A number of issues continue to weigh heavily on South African economy, and South Africa's rand set a new record low against the dollar recently from 13 rand to 16 rand against the dollar. Now, the high rate of unemployment remains a factor of concern. Indications are that the South African economy is suffering immensely, and according to the 2015 Momentum Unisa Wealth Report, South African households' net wealth decreased in real terms in the third quarter of last year. This means that the real household net wealth declined from 122.8 billion to 6 billion, to rather 6,296 billion. To unpack this scenario, we are joined by Johan van Tonder, economist and researcher at Momentum. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
Yeah, we've had all this talk of the economy being subdued and the economy not doing well. But then, in a general picture that has been painted, how should South Africa realize the effect of this current development and prevailing economic situation upon their households?
Yeah, it's very difficult times for the consumers and households alike. What's been happening to them in terms of their own monetary situation is something that's maybe last happened in pre-1994. So what's going to happen to them is they're going to have to make very tough decisions, especially throughout 2016 and maybe even 2017, half 2017. Because what they're going to face is not just increasing prices and those with debt increasing debt. They're going to be faced with, as you said, unemployment, possible retrenchments. We might see a lot of labor strikes for higher wages this year. We're going to see food prices increasing. On top of that, we don't have a lot of electricity to produce. So for the consumer, it's going to be tough because their income is basically going to stay the same, but the pressure on the expenses is going to increase. They're going to want to borrow more money, which they can't afford to borrow, which going to put them in a very difficult situation within a year or two as they can't afford the repayments thereof. And as we've seen in the wealth report already, consumers allocate about 16% of their income towards the repayment of unsecured debt, but they only save about 8% of their income. So already we see an imbalance there between savings as well as repayments on debt. So we're all going to have to sit down and prioritize our expenses, see if we can actually afford what's going to happen to us, and if not, we're going to have to make choices and decisions to revert to expenses we can actually afford.
Now, what about the decline in the value of assets, especially the household assets and financial assets that have been invested at the JSE? We saw markets tumbling down. This has been a trend over the past 3 months, and many people are looking at offshore investments now. What should the way forward be?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question to answer. Everybody wants to find out where to invest your money, but before we go there, just on the assets, if we as households in this country, basically our total assets amount to about 423% of our income. Now, if we look internationally, it should be around 800% of our income. So already we are at half where we should be in order to have what we call a financially well lifestyle. So with everything that's happened in the South African economy and the markets going down and the value of everybody's pension funds as well as provident funds dropping, going forward, what they can do, if they can afford it, is to increase their savings, especially when prices or share prices go down, because then you can purchase more shares with less money, which will stand you in good stead within a year or two, because when share prices start increasing again, you've got 2 shares instead of 1 that you've purchased when prices decline. So this is one way of looking at it. But secondly, in conditions like this, what we need to do is to diversify. We have to look at our cash investments. We know interest rates are going up, so that will be a favorite asset class to invest going forward. And as you said, if the rand's going to continue going down, it might be a sort of a buffer if you invest in foreign listed or dual listed companies in South Africa. So pretty much those are the two, and property shares maybe is the other one.
Just in closing, there's a contradiction here. Many people are saying the value of the rand continues to decline, but on the other hand, so is the petrol, the oil price. That contradiction, can you just explain to somebody in layman terms? There are benefits when the oil price is down.
Yeah, I think everything turned against us like in last year, but the one thing in our favor was the oil price that also came down as a result of oversupply in the rest of the world, as well as slower economic growth internationally. So the dollar price of oil came down. I mean, 2 years ago it was $110 for a barrel. Now it's less than $30 for a barrel. So if the rand stayed the same, we could have had like an oil or petrol price of 8 rand per liter. But unfortunately the rand weakened and we have something like above 12 rand. But had the oil price not come down, our petrol price could have been like at 13, 14 rand a liter. So that's the one positive, at least, for consumers.
All right. Surely the situation is going to continue this way. Perhaps the rent can rebound and the oil price as well.
Yeah, what we do have is a very undervalued rand, and we expect it to gain ground again within 2 years or so.
All right. Thank you very much. We are speaking to Mr. Johan van Tonder. He's an economist and researcher at Momentum. Now, moving on to other news now. MTN's bitter battle with the Nigerian government looks to be far from over. The telecommunications giant's share price opened 1% down on the JSE this morning. The drop followed news that Nigeria's telecommunications minister Adebayo Shitu ruled out an out-of-court settlement with the company yesterday unless it withdraws its lawsuit challenging the multi-billion rand fine imposed by the Nigerian government last year. In October last year, Nigeria slapped MTN with a $5.5 billion fine for failing to disconnect millions of unregistered users from its network. This was later reduced to $4 billion, and MTN had to pay by the 31st of December. MTN missed the deadline, deciding to challenge the fine in court. The Nigerian